Will the Carolina Panthers pursue a wide receiver one this offseason? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, because tomorrow is Friday, and on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, and all you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We're continuing to preview the offseason for the Carolina Panthers, looking at every single position group here on the offense, the defense, and all of special teams as well. We already talked about the quarterbacks, talked about the running backs. Today, let's take a look at the wide receivers in Carolina. Last year, in 2023, that is, the Panthers wide receiver group was the worst in the NFL. So in 2024, they needed to take a massive leap forward for not just Bryce Young to be effective, but for the offense in total to be effective. And I thought that in 2024, they did exactly that. And the Panthers did a really good job last offseason of upgrading the talent level there at the wide receiver position. And then during the season, those players were doing a really good job at actually producing and living up to some of the hype that was there for them heading into 2024. So let's look back at 2024 season and how the Panthers wide receiver core performed, starting off with Adam Thielen, who in 2023 was the only redeemable wide receiver on the team. And he was really good. 100 receptions, 1,000 yards, only 4 touchdowns, which represented just how poor the passing offense was because of Bryce Young's struggles, the offensive line injuries, the receivers, other than Adam Thielen not being able to separate. And when they did, not be able to catch the ball. And if they did catch the ball, they did separate. They didn't do anything with it, which was a problem, obviously, in 2024. But Adam Thielen was excellent in 2023 and was really good in 2024 again in the games that he played. He did miss 7 games due to a hamstring injury on one of the best throws and catches made all season long for the Panthers in the 2024 season, in that just euphoric afternoon in Las Vegas when Andy Dalton took over as starting quarterback and the Panthers offense finally looked effective for the first time in really years when watching that. But Adam last season in those 10 games he played had 48 receptions, 615 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was really good again, had a 58.1 receiving success rate, 77.4 catch percentage, which looking at it, Pro Football Reference has literally everybody who caught a pass all season long. And you click on catch percentage, you want to see who had the best one. They have running backs up there, have tight ends up there, and all of that. You got to go all the way in trying to figure out which guys actually played games and which guys are actually contributors. When you look at players who played at least 10 games at the wide receiver position, Adam Thielen ranks third in the NFL in catch percentage. I know he's behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I forget who the other receiver was who was ahead of him, but third best catch percentage in the NFL among players who played at least 10 games this past season in the NFL. He was the 30th highest graded wide receiver according to Pro Football Focus. Adam Thielen is somebody who said after the season's over that he was going to think about whether he was going to come back and play, and he has not said anything. It's been a couple of weeks, and he said he was going to take a couple of weeks. We have not seen an announcement. The thought is right now he will be back. I did see him on Friday night at the Hornets game, looking ever so youthful and sprightly, and so we'll see if he comes back. I do expect Adam Thielen to come back, and he will honor, which is probably not the best way to say it, but he will play out his contract here in Carolina coming up here in 2025, and will be another important piece to this wide receiver core, which is a good thing. But also, you like to see some guys be able to find a way to kind of come up and take over Adam Thielen's spot. And we did see that this year as some rookies had to come in and make some plays, especially when Adam missed time, when the Panthers got rid of Diontae Johnson, who we'll talk about momentarily. But there was two encouraging rookies at the wide receiver position. Of course, we know the Carolina Panthers were sitting there at 33, expected not to draft until Friday night to begin the second round. They could not wait another day. They traded with Buffalo, went up there, one full spot to 32, plus fifth-year option they got to get Xavier Legette, the wide receiver out of South Carolina, who was phenomenal in 2023 down there in Columbia. Didn't have the best career until it was all said and done at the end, but the Panthers loved everything about him. So they drafted him, and he came in with expectations of being someone who's going to be a serious contributor for the Panthers offense in 2024. And for the most part, he did live up to those expectations. It's not like Dave Canales and the Panthers offense immediately said, you're going to have to come in and be our top guy. He had to earn the role. And you remember during training camp and when the season even began, it was Jonathan Mingo, who was the wide receiver 3 in Carolina behind Diontae Johnson and behind Adam Thielen before it was Xavier Legette. But we also knew Mingo can't play. So it was only going to be a matter of time until Xavier Legette went in there and took over that role and really ran with it. He had his ups and downs, had the hamstring injury during OTAs and mandatory minicamp as well that cost him some time. That he had the foot scare that they thought was significant, turned out to not be the case. So we missed some time there in the preseason as well. I believe he only had one target in the preseason games. That was against Buffalo, which ended up being a drop, and that would become a problem later on in the season for Xavier Legette. So it took him some time to really get his feet underneath them. And once he did, I thought for the most part, he showed you what you were hoping to see. He didn't have some breakout season, didn't play like Marvin Harrison Jr. did, or a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., any of those dudes that were drafted significantly higher than him in the first round, which is totally fine. But 49 receptions, 497 yards, 4 touchdowns, you should absolutely take that from your first round rookie wide receiver, who I don't necessarily believe is going to turn out to be the number 1 receiver in Carolina. Carolina may need him to be that down the road, but he's certainly going to be a contributor and give you more than what he gave you this past season. Had a 44% receiving success rate, 58.3 catch percentage. Now the drops were an issue. Had 8 drops, had a 14% drop percentage according to PFF, which not ideal at all. And that was the 8 drops for the most among the rookie class, tied for the most among the rookie class. Malik Neighbors, by the way, had 8 drops as well. He did put up significantly better numbers, but still had 8 drops. It was an issue for him in New York this past season. And Xavier Legette ended up being the 13th highest graded wide receiver among the rookie class here in 2024. So you expected Legette to produce for Carolina, but I don't know what you expected out of Jalen Coker. And there certainly was plenty of discussion after the draft when Jalen Coker, the undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross, was signed by the Panthers to a very generous free agency deal to come to Carolina to be a receiver and to fight for a roster spot. And there's a lot of people thinking, oh, this might be a diamond in the rough. This could be a guy that comes in here, makes some plays. And well, those of you who believe that, you were correct, because Jalen Coker had 32 receptions, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns this season. His receiving success rate was the best on the team among the wide receivers at 58.7%. Had a catch percentage of 69.6%. And here's the number that is lovely: 0 goose egg drops this past season here in Carolina. Looking at wide receivers in his draft class, in the rookie class, he was the 6th highest graded wide receiver in the NFL among the rookies this past year, according to PFF. And you're looking at just both Legette and Coker, the Panthers have something in these guys that should make them feel hopeful for the position moving forward. Both of them ranked in the top 10 in receiving yards, as Legette was 9th and Coker was 10th. And they were also top 10 among rookies, by the way, in receptions, with Legette 7th and Coker 10th. So statistically, receptions, receiving yards, these guys were top 10 wide receivers among the rookies. Looking at PFF and their numbers, Coker absolutely was, as he was the 6th highest graded, and Legette, necessarily according to at least one way to look at it, overall grade, was not. But the Carolina Panthers, with Legette, with Coker, even throw in JT Sanders, we'll talk about tight ends next week, you got 3 guys that are young pass catchers who should be significant players on this offense down the road, which is an awesome thing to see. Now, the Panthers got Adam Thielen to produce when he was out there on the field after missing 7 games. They also got something for the future and for the now in the rookies, Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. They were hoping to have a number one wide receiver who's going to step up and make some plays. And that was supposed to be Diontae Johnson. And as we saw, he had a nice day in Las Vegas, had some other games that were good down the road. But in the end of the day, it didn't really work out for Carolina and for Diontae Johnson. While he was here, he did have 30 receptions, 357 yards, 3 touchdowns in those 7 games that he played. But he also missed a lot of time in practice. And you wonder how many of those injuries were legit, how many of them were him just like, I don't really want to practice today. It was a weird situation that was ongoing, and there was plenty of rumors circling around whether he was going to re-sign in Carolina. I remember Adam Schefter of ESPN going up there on the Pat McAfee show and just throwing a Molotov cocktail in the Panther fans' living room saying, no, he's not going to re-sign anyway, so go ahead and get rid of him. And well, the Panthers eventually did get rid of Diontae Johnson because he didn't fit. He was a malcontent, wasn't really a team guy, and they decided, let's move on. And once they moved on, it turned out to be a great decision, even though moving from a 6th-round pick to a 5th-round pick, doing a pick swap with Baltimore was not the most appealing compensation, considering by reports from Mike Cave, the Charlotte Observer, the Panthers were searching for a 3rd-round pick. Now you go all the way back to the spring prior. Pittsburgh effectively traded Diontae Johnson for a 6th-round pick, so his value didn't really go up that much. It did go up a little bit, but not as high as Carolina would have hoped for after those 7 games that he played. He only had, once he left Carolina, went to Baltimore, and then briefly was in Houston, only had 3 receptions for 18 yards once he was traded. So clearly, Dan Morgan, Dave Canales, Brant Tillis, Panthers organization made the right decision by moving on. And at the end of the day, when you look at the trade compensation, the 6th to a 5th, the Panthers have moved up 21 spots in the NFL draft. So 21 spots move off of a receiver who ended up not doing anything once he left Carolina. And had he stayed, maybe things work out. But clearly, that was a guy that they had to get out of the building, a guy who ended up kind of taking over that role and having similar production this past season was David Moore, who had 32 receptions, 351 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Not too far off from what we saw from Diontae Johnson in 7 games in Carolina. Now, of course, David Moore was not necessarily the number 1 receiver. He was not necessarily playing all the roles that Diontae Johnson played, but he did start 5 games this year when Johnson was traded away with Thielen being out and Jalen Coker missing some time as well, had a 39.7 receiving success rate, 51.7 catch percentage, had the 88th highest grade among wide receivers according to PFF. This was the best season that you've seen from David Moore since his final season in Seattle in 2020. And that was right before the Panthers were going to bring him in to potentially be their number 3 receiver. And they finally got what they were hoping for. Just a couple years down the road with a Seattle staff that knew him better. So David Moore, we got the 2020 version of him in Carolina this past year. So that's a look back at 2024 for the Panthers wide receivers. Speaking of Johnson and the Panthers trying to make him be their wide receiver 1, not working out, will they pursue a wide receiver 1 again this offseason? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Nearly a year later, there is no way you can sit here and look at the current Carolina Panthers wide receiver core and be upset about the state of it compared to where it was a year ago when you looked at, okay, Adam Thielen's really good, but Laviska Shenault wasn't great, got injured. Shi Smith wasn't even on the team anymore. You looked also at DJ Chark. What a disappointment that was. It was a brutal group, the worst wide receiver core in the NFL. And really, like, that's 2 straight off seasons. Once they traded away DJ Moore, it immediately became the worst wide receiver core in the NFL. And adding Thielen and adding Chark turned out to not be enough, as Chark did not live up to what they were hoping, and even Jonathan Mingo as well did not live up to what they were hoping for in that year one in 2023 of Frank Reich, which only lasted 11 games. You go into last offseason, okay, you had more the year prior, and then you became the worst receiving core, and then you add some guys, and they were still the worst receiving core in the NFL. Here, on January 30th, 2025, this is not the worst wide receiving core in the NFL. Now, it's not like it's a top 10, not probably even a top half unit in the NFL, but as we just talked about, there are encouraging pieces like Xavier Legette, like Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen coming back for another season. Going to be 35 coming up here, which is, he's been youthful. He's played really well, but Adam Thielen at 35 years old, let's see what we get from him this upcoming season down here in Carolina. So with all that being said, Thielen's a nice piece. Coker's a nice piece. Legette's a nice piece, but neither one of those guys are considered top-tier wide receiver ones. Once upon a time, you could argue that Adam Thielen was that, either him or Stephon Diggs, whether you want to argue, that's all for you to do. But he was a really good receiver, was outstanding, was like an all-pro, wasn't he? So he's not that anymore. And I don't know necessarily whether I've seen enough from his collegiate career to even his rookie year to believe Xavier Legette will be that. And in Coker, well, certainly didn't watch any of his games in his collegiate career, but rookie year, certainly encouraging. I don't know if they have one. So if you don't have one, should you be in pursuit of one this offseason, knowing that your quarterback, Bryce Young, remember him, was outstanding in the final 9 weeks of the season, was a top 6 quarterback according to PFF in those final 9 weeks from week 9 to week 18? Wouldn't you want to surround him with more talent this upcoming season and not just rest on your laurels and say, oh, well, you know, Legette looks pretty good and we drafted in the first round, and same with Coker and Adams coming back. That's fine. We'll bring back David Moore as well. No, they need to be looking to add that A1 kind of guy, in my opinion. Now, the top names on the market, looking at overthecap.com, clicked on wide receivers, free agents, and all that. They had 5 guys listed, which I would imagine are their top 5. And also just looking at the market, probably are the top 5. These are the top 5. Looking at the free agency market at wide receiver for guys who potentially could fill the void of that wide receiver 1 position here in Carolina. Number 1 was Stephon Diggs, who is coming off of a torn ACL. He'll be playing on his 4th team, I believe, in his career, as he was in Minnesota, then to Buffalo, where things were great. Things were good in Minnesota as well. And then down to Houston, didn't really work out because of really the injury, but also things weren't necessarily stellar prior to that injury. So do you want a player coming off a torn ACL, which was suffered pretty early in the season? I don't know necessarily if you want that. He also is over 30. Do you need to add another over 30 wide receiver? I don't know. So Tee Higgins also is up there, and he would be, and I think is probably going to be considered by everyone out there as the number 1 free agent wide receiver, which is going to command a ton of money. Looking at his market value right now, 4 years, $100 million, average salary of $25 million. He may get more than that. I do not see how Cincinnati is going to be able to keep him and Jamar Chase around. Now, if I'm Cincinnati, if I'm Duke Tobin, their general manager, which of course I'm not, and, you know, they've always been a pretty pity-pinching kind of organization up there, I'm not giving Tee Higgins a cent until I make sure Jamar Chase gets paid, considering Jamar Chase just won a Triple Crown and is the best wide receiver in the NFL. You can make an argument for Justin Jefferson if you like. We're not here to argue about that on today's show. But Tee Higgins, spectacular. 6th highest graded wide receiver according to PFF this past season. You watch that game against Denver, a game that Cincinnati had to have to stay in contention for the playoffs for the wild card, which of course they did not end up getting. He was awesome that Saturday evening, and you saw exactly what Tee Higgins can offer a team as their top guy. And of course, he wasn't even the top guy. You can wonder whether he would be as good without Jamar Chase on the other side. Totally reasonable to ask that question, but it's clear he's a dude, and Carolina needs a dude there at that wide receiver position, aside from the guys that they're likely going to return. Keenan Allen, who is a North Carolina native, even though since leaving the state to go to Cal, which is crazy with the Cal, and then playing for the Chargers for all those years in San Diego, then Los Angeles, he went to Chicago. He's not been back home in the Carolinas. I don't really even know if he feels like North Carolina is still home to him. Probably is, but had 70 receptions, 744 yards, 7 touchdowns last year playing with the rookie in Chicago, Caleb Williams. That would be another option. Amari Cooper, who I honestly forgot about this season. Had a down year. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving season the last couple of years, had 44 receptions, 547 yards, 4 touchdowns, was traded from the Browns to Buffalo. And I was watching that game last Sunday, AFC title game, and I totally forgot he was even on the Bills because where was he in a game to go to the Super Bowl? So I'm not super excited about that. Then Chris Godwin, I do like him. He's coming off, like Stephon Diggs, a significant leg injury. Probably not as significant as the ACL tear, but maybe it is. But he's somebody that can make sense. Now, his money, will it be the same as it would have been before the injury? Maybe, we'll see. But it really would be T and then Chris Godwin, like Keenan Allen as a top three of those that we just discussed there that would make me that interested as far as signing him. But really, it's Tee Higgins. Like, should the Panthers be all in? I'm saying kind of, yeah, I would love to see them be all in. But will they be able to afford it? There's another guy out there as well, Garrett Wilson, we talked about a couple weeks ago. At least was asked on the mailbag if the Panthers would pursue a trade for Garrett Wilson. And why did this become a thing? Well, there was a tweet about Bryce Young, and Garrett Wilson commented just praising Bryce Young and how well he played. And people were thinking, oh, whoa, the Jets, they got a new head coach coming in, new general manager, Aaron Rodgers, likely not going to stay around. Does Garrett Wilson want to stay in New York, where clearly he's frustrated over how things have played out at the quarterback position in the last couple of years? Well, do you want to come to Carolina? All right, well, everybody just take a deep breath, calm down. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. And I said a couple weeks ago, I don't really see why the Jets would do that. You're going to bring in, like, they already brought a new head coach. It's going to be Aaron Glenn from the Lions. And it looks like Steve Wilkes is going to be his defensive coordinator up there in New York. And then you're also looking at bringing in, of course, a new OC. You're going to bring in a GM, which they've not done yet. I don't know why the Jets GM would want to come in and immediately offload Garrett Wilson. And if he's going to do that, it's going to cost Carolina Panthers this year the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft. Are you willing to part ways the 8th overall pick for Garrett Wilson? Also, knowing the Panthers really need to fix the defense this offseason. It's probably going to take 2 off seasons, this one and next one, to probably get the defense to where you would hope and like for it to be moving forward. Maybe not top 10, but not the worst in the history of the NFL scoring defense-wise. So I don't know why the Jets would do that, why they would say, new GM comes in, get rid of Garrett Wilson and not get the Panthers first-round pick this year. I also don't understand if they're going to bring in a new quarterback. It's not be Aaron Rodgers. Hey, new quarterback, welcome. You don't have any receivers. We saw how that worked out for the Panthers because if they do have a rookie, whether it be like Shador or it be Cam Ward or someone else, they like someone else, why would they put him in the same situation they put that Carolina put Bryce Young in where, oh, sorry, we traded away your top receiver so we could get you, and now you have no receivers? Wouldn't make a lot of sense. But if it happens, hell, I'm all in, man. I think Garrett Wilson, of the options we talked about, it'd be either him or Tee Higgins that would truly interest me in Carolina. The rest of them, I can talk myself into it, I suppose. But as far as like right now, on January 30th, 2025, yeah, I would love either Tee Higgins or Garrett Wilson. But is that how the Panthers are going to address the offseason? We'll talk about how they should and how they probably will address the offseason here at the wide receiver position in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your live events out there with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. How should the Carolina Panthers address the wide receiver position this offseason? And also, how will they potentially address the wide receiver position this offseason? I know the cap situation right now isn't necessarily conducive to going out there and spending a ton of money on wide receiver, or really any position at this point in time. Looking at overthecap.com, the Panthers have $21.2 million. Now, there are ways to open up some salary cap space. You got a guy like Taylor Moton, who right now is a $31 million cap hit, the highest on the team. There's no way in hell He's playing on a $31 million cap hit. They can extend him, which I think would make a lot of sense. That would save nearly $13 million. There's other guys out there like Robert Hunt, who has $21 million cap hit. Maybe he plays on it. Maybe they decide to restructure. That can open up $11 million. Don't know necessarily that's my favorite thing to do. There's J.C. Horn out there who has a $12 million cap hit based off of the fifth-year option right now, which is fully guaranteed. If they extend him, which I think should happen, that opens up $9 million. So you see where you're getting some more money. Guys like Miles Sanders can save some cap space there by cutting him. Same thing with Shai Tuttle. There are ways to get far more than the $21 million Carolina currently has, according to overthecap.com, as they still are a month and a half from the new league year, which is going to be March 12th. I think I've been saying March 13th. That's my mistake. March 12th, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the US of A. That's when the new league year begins. That is the official start to free agency. Now, of course, 2 days prior, on March 10th, noon Eastern Standard Time here in the US of A, that will be the beginning of the legal negotiating period where teams will start announcing. And we have signed, we're not teams will announce it, but we'll see the reports of the Panthers or who so-and-so team has agreed to terms of blah, blah, blah. Then those will become official on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US of A. But looking at it, though, the Panthers can find a way to open up some cap space by doing some of those moves I just mentioned there. And that can allow them to address receiver if they want to address it. Now, to address it the way I'd like for them to do, it's going to cost a ton of money. Like, Tee Higgins is not going to be cheap. And the market value of 4 years, $100 million, maybe not as high as what, maybe actually less than what it's going to be. Like we talked about it with Brian Burns last year, his market value and all the market values really for Spot Track have never really been exactly, and why would they? It's just a guess. They've never necessarily been exactly what teams end up signing players to. I think Higgins gets a ton of money and probably more than that. And can Carolina afford to do it? Dan Morgan said that they would be aggressive, smart, but aggressive when it comes to free agency here in a month and a half in March. I don't know if they're going to be that aggressive. And you can question whether it is smart when wide receiver is not the biggest position of need to spend that much money. I do look at it as you're getting a guy who's already a proven commodity. He is someone who's still young. He was entering in his prime, and you're giving him a quarterback who finally has confidence and is a former number one overall pick, just like the quarterback he had before. Now, no, I'm not comparing Bryce Young to Joe Burrow and saying he's going to be Joe Burrow. It would be awesome because if he is, the Panthers probably going to dominate the NFC for the next decade if that turns out being the case. But it's not like Tee Higgins is going to be stepping in a bad situation quarterback-wise, just based off of what we saw in the final half of the season in 2025. So why not, looking at how Bryce has played, not give him a receiver of Tee Higgins caliber? Well, the why not would be just the cost, and also what else Carolina has to fix. You got to figure out what you're going to do. Like Taylor Moton at right tackle, what are you going to do about that? Center, who's going to play center? Tight end, got to add somebody there. Figure out running back situation. Who's going to be behind Chuba Hubbard with Jonathan Brooks likely missing a lot of time this upcoming season. Of course, defensive tackle. Plenty of questions there outside of Derek Brown when he comes back. Linebacker, probably okay. Got to find some depth. Corner, what are you going to do opposite of JC? You're bringing back Mike Jackson or not? You got to get completely new safety room. Probably find a new kick. Like there was a lot of things to answer aside from who's going to be wide receiver one next year. And do we need one necessarily if you're asking that yourself as the Carolina Panthers, as Dan Morgan, as Brant Tillis, as Dave Canales. So I would like to see them go after Tee Higgins, but I think it's far more likely that they go and try to find some more affordable targets. And we talked about this with Mike Kay a couple of weeks ago. He thought that they likely are going to try to raise the floor, necessarily go out there and add a top tier guy like Tee Higgins or a Garrett Wilson if there was a trade out there the Panthers could make. And some of the guys I'm looking at, I guess, would be Hollywood Brown. That was someone who last year we had mentioned here on the show, who's mentioned multiple times. That would make a lot of sense for Carolina. He's going to be playing for a Super Bowl, miss a lot of time in KC. And if he gets that ring, maybe he's going to look to find somewhere else to go. I don't know. De'Ami Brown, Charlotte guy, went to West Meck, played at North Carolina, didn't do much as a third-round pick out of Carolina until the playoffs here in Washington this past month. Maybe he's someone who's finally broken out. That could maybe make sense. Mac Hollins as well. I mean, I'm not just trying to bring up North Carolina guys. I know I'm wearing North Carolina on my chest here for the folks watching on YouTube. I'm just looking at dudes that kind of would be cheap, that could make some sort of sense for Carolina. Because outside of like the top tier receivers, like there's names, but it's not like Diggs is that attractive. It's not like Cooper is that attractive right now. Like Higgins is, I think Allen is, but you're getting pretty close there. And then Godwin. So you look down the list, like, oh man, it's not like there's that many attractive receivers, which maybe it makes more sense for them to draft another one. I have seen out there's been mock drafts that have suggested the Panthers get a receiver. I've even seen in the first round, people linking Teteroa McMillan out of Arizona to Carolina as that red zone threat, that big body receiver. Sure, he's a really good player. Was Arizona's offense this past season, considering they had nothing else to go to, but he was outstanding the last 2 years there in Tucson. That might be the best thing to do, just looking at some of the other guys that are out there, but like they got to raise the floor for sure. I would love for them to just raise the ceiling by getting a guy like Tee Higgins. But we'll see. Likely going to try to go for a cheaper target. And I would think that David Moore resigns as well. So the verdict is of how they're going to address it, how they should address it. I think they should try to be aggressive, but they'll likely go cheap and bank on some of the young guys like Legette, like Coker coming along, and Adam Thielen being able to stay healthy this season, and David Moore producing again, and then add another piece to that core and have 5 guys that they really can trust in 2025. It's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast for our Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where again on Friday, which is tomorrow, I'll be back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Friday.